Aphrodite is one of the great goddesses of the Greeks. She represents sexuality, sensuality, beauty, the sea, the sky, relationship, coupling of all sorts. And she is also one image for the world soul. One interesting aspect of Aphrodite is that she is often described with certain words that relate to the gestures that she makes in paintings and in sculpture, some of the objects that you see around her. This slide shows about these gestures and these objects. And the idea is that Aphrodite, like all mythology, tells us a great deal about the deep powers that move through us, like the powers of sex and love and the desire to be with someone, all of which is related to Aphrodite. And her gestures will spell all of that out in more detail. So we will look at some of those gestures and objects that are traditionally associated with her. The first example is one of the early artistic sculptures of her. And this is called the Aphrodite Knidos. It was made by the Greek sculptor Praxiteles, and was offered to the people of Kos, an island just off Turkey today. The people of Kos refused it, and so the people of a nearby island, Knidos, accepted it and built a temple to Aphrodite. And apparently, people would come to the island to visit this temple and make a procession around it or just walk around it to honor this goddess and to look very closely at this depiction of who she is. And that's what we're going to do. So notice in this Aphrodite Knidos that, first of all, that she is not standing erect and tall and straight. Sometimes the word orthia is related to goddesses who stand straight and are firm and tall and commanding. Aphrodite has a different spirit. Her body is loose. It is bent. It's on a curve. Look at how much her left knee is bent. Notice her arms bent, how her left arm is resting on the vase, and her right arm is also in a posture of rest, maybe about to or partly covering up her genital area. This we'll see later is also a gesture of Aphrodite that is a bit confusing. And also notice that on her left arm she's wearing a band, and we see this in a lot of statues of Aphrodite that she wears jewelry. So adorning her body and paying attention to her body and its beauty is a major aspect of this spirit we call Aphrodite. So jewelry is important to her, and we could then think to ourselves that jewelry in our lives is more important than we may think, and that by using jewelry and by giving jewelry to people as gifts, that we are entering deeply into the spirit of Aphrodite. Another thing that she is doing in this particular sculpture is that if you were to stand straight, looking at her straight on, rather than where the camera was in this case, you would see that her face was turned away. That is a specific gesture called parakiptusa. And it relates to the fact that Aphrodite, again, like she is not standing straight, she's not looking straight. She's somewhat deceptive, and you have to watch out for her. She has many gifts to offer, but she's also somewhat tricky and difficult to deal with. Notice too that the hair is carefully made up, and that's a very important part of Aphrodite's presencing. That is, her hair is an important aspect of who she is. And that means also that our hair can be very important. And caring for our hair and buying things for it and giving time to it, is in service of this goddess. This next sculpture of Aphrodite is the Aphrodite of Melos, which is another island, another Greek island. The word Melos means apple. And when this statue was discovered in the ground, they found near it, broken off from it, was a hand with an apple in it. I think the one reason why she's associated with an apple is the mythological story of Atalanta. Atalanta was a young woman who was devoted to Artemis, the virgin goddess, and didn't want to get married. But Aphrodite and other gods were hoping that she would get married, so they decided to give her a chance and have a race. She would have to race some men, and if she could win the race, then she could do what she wanted. But during the race, Aphrodite tossed an apple toward her, and it distracted Atalanta. She was interested in the apple, and it slowed her down, and she lost the race. So Aphrodite had her will in that case. I think Aphrodite is probably also related to the apple because, like many fruits, when you cut them in half, what you see there could be seen as an image of the female sexual organs or area. And this is very important to Aphrodite. It may be difficult for us to appreciate, but our sexuality, our physical sexuality, our bodies, are what she's very, very concerned about. And so that any image of our sexual nature is important to Aphrodite. Notice, too, in this particular sculpture, it's so interesting that half of her body is nude and half of it is draped quite significantly with some sort of garment. She is half nude and half clothed. That is typical of Aphrodite. She's a liminal figure in this regard. That means she's neither one thing nor another. She's in between. She is in the space between being nude, which in early times meant celestial or heavenly Aphrodite, and dressed, which meant the earthly Aphrodite. Today we might reverse those things because we tend to associate nudity with earthiness. Notice, too, that she also has the parakiptusa attitude of her head turned away. This is the Venus, the Roman name for Aphrodite. This is Venus painted by Lucas Cranach, the elder, who had made several paintings of both Artemis figures and Aphrodite or Venus. Here we see the emphasis on hair, which even stronger. We have this long red hair and carefully made up and braided. Attention to the hair. We see some makeup. We see jewelry on her, even more jewelry than before. So that jewelry theme is important. And here we have another theme that comes up sometimes with Aphrodite, and that is she has a garment that apparently is covering her. On the other hand, it's transparent, so it doesn't really cover. So it's liminal. It's in between. It both covers and it doesn't cover. And that's who she is. She is revealing and not revealing. And maybe she's suggesting that our sexuality is that way, that it seems to be very physical and clear what it is, and yet it's also something quite mysterious. This is a beautiful statue in Ottawa at the National Gallery of Canada, and it's quite a large painting, quite tall, and beautifully presented there. Here is Venus Pudica, which is the modest one. And here again we see her covered with maybe some modesty, and yet the garment is not doing a whole lot to really cover her. So she's in that liminal space. You can just make out that her head is in parakiptusa gesture. She has an apple in her hand, another gesture of her about a great mystery that she represents. So this is a very interesting sculpture and really worth meditating on for quite a while to consider what it all suggests, both to the nature of this goddess and myth and the nature of our own sexuality. This is the Venus at the Capitoline Museum in Rome, the Museo Capitolino, which is sometimes called the Capitoline Venus, where we have her hair again. This statue is based quite a bit on the Aphrodite of Knidos. You see the vessel and the robe or the garment. You see her partially covering herself, giving us that liminal sense of being both very sexual but modest at the same time. There's so many ways of understanding that. One way might be that even as we are sexual, there's a place for modesty, or that modesty and privacy and covering yourself is not against our sexuality. There's something where the two go together. It's quite a mystery and very, very interesting to contemplate. In this particular statue, we see something that's also common in Aphrodite, one of her gestures, that has a proper name. It's called Kali Pygos, which means a beautiful backside. So somehow people were interested in looking at Aphrodite from the back as well. And when they looked at her sculpture, they would go around her completely to make sure they saw her backside. We might meditate on that and think about our sexuality and everything we do, that not only what we present to the world and who we are in a frontal way, but also our back, our shadow, our hidden side is also very important. And notice that she's bent over. You can see that from this angle, how much she is bent over. And so then she's not upright. She's not standing tall. Here's an image of dawn, which is one of the attendants, or one of the, what would you say, sort of an avatar or manifestation of embodiment of Aphrodite. And here's a hymn to dawn. Dawn as Aphrodite. Think of those two together. Radiant dawn has risen in wonder. In her white splendor, she is like the waves of the sea. She makes our path easy and rich, and she is kind and friendly. When you dress, goddess of the morning, you bare your breast and shine in awesome beauty. Beautiful hymn. Imagine singing that hymn every morning when you get up, or going to the temple of Aphrodite and hearing a chorus chant that hymn. Very often they would do it with with instruments accompanying them. So you can think about this with Aphrodite as well, that she is also the beauty of the world and the sensuality of the world and the pleasure of being in such a sensual existence. And one of those, at the very beginning of our day, one of those sensual experiences is seeing the dawn, seeing the light come after a night of darkness. And that is like a beginning to see Aphrodite, baring her breast, meaning sort of showing herself, revealing the beauty of the world to us at that crucial moment when the dawn breaks. Here is Aphrodite in an early frieze or sculpture, and we see her taking a bath and washing her hair. And she has attendants, one with a pitcher of water, and the other, it looks like something to wear again, which it would be typical, so a little robe or a towel to help her in the bath. So this is an indication to us that when we bathe, we are doing something sacramental, something holy, from the religion of Aphrodite, from that point of view. And that the things we use, like that pitcher of water, or I would say our shampoos and our oils and our various things that we bring to the bath, the bubbles and so on, these are all the important sacramental objects in the religion of Aphrodite. And therefore they are all holy, which is to say they have soul. They're very, very deep and profound. This is another Aphrodite at the bath, crouching down, washing herself. This particular Aphrodite is in the entrance hall to the British Museum. And it's wonderful that people going into the museum to see the great art of the world pass past Aphrodite at her bath. And you see the Parikaptusa, her head turned really strongly this time, and her hands making slight gestures of covering herself. And it's a beautiful representation of our own sexuality, of our own physicality, of being in the world with a sense of beauty. This gesture has a name as well, this one of Aphrodite looking over her shoulder. It looks like she's looking at her backside. And this is a gesture that's called, well, we saw it before, Kali Pygos, the beautiful backside. But the gesture of looking at herself is also part of it. Here's a modern example, a photograph of this often happens, that a contemporary actress might, or actor might, just accidentally, thoughtlessly, or unconsciously take on a gesture that is classic, that is one of the gestures of Aphrodite. This is Kate Beckinsale doing this, and this would be called the Kali Pygos, or the beautiful backside. And this is who she is, and this is what she's doing. It's very interesting. This is just a modern picture of someone coming out of the water, and this is also another gesture of Aphrodite called Anadiamani. Anadiamani is rising up after having been submerged. And this is one of her gestures. We find this gesture described in the poetry of D.H. Lawrence, and we see it obviously in many photographs. Coming out of the water, coming out of the bath, that's one of the key gestures of Aphrodite. Just think about it, this moment in a person's life. It may happen every day or at least several times a week. And you may glimpse somebody coming out of the water, and just notice that this is a key gesture of the beauty of the world. Here's another example of that same thing, coming out of a pool, stepping out. And notice that she's wearing a towel. The towel is one of the sacramental objects of Aphrodite. And here we have a man. I don't think this is a gender issue. We have a man coming out of the shower with the towel. See, that's the important thing here. He may not be thinking about it, but he's actually using an object that is part of the rituals of Aphrodite, a very important object, the towel. And he's a little wet, and he's coming out of the shower, and that is where Aphrodite is, and we could meditate on that. What does it mean to be just coming out of the water, just coming into life, just having been renewed in the water, baptized, brought into a new life, and the towel is there to help us get back into life. It's quite a meaningful moment. Aphrodite was also associated with the mirror, and here we see in the bathroom we have a mirror, and the woman is looking into it. I suppose in some circumstances that could be a narcissus mirror where someone is looking at themselves maybe narcissistically or just enjoying who they are. But in this case, it seems to me it's more like an Aphrodite mirror where the woman is looking at herself and maybe examining herself for her beauty and maybe considering what she wants to do to be more beautiful. That's all very much in the spirit of Aphrodite. It's a holy thing to do. This is a picture just to show you how strong it can be. This is Mary Magdalene, who is sort of an Aphrodite figure in the Christian context. And look at all the hair she has over her body, showing the importance of hair. This is another Cranach painting of Aphrodite or Venus. We see apples in the tree above her, that object associated with her. And we see a hat around her head that emphasizes the heavenly side of Aphrodite, but then she also has her hair carefully done, and she has jewelry around her neck, all of which is holy in the religion of Aphrodite. And then Eros, sometimes her son, or at least her aide, is there with her with his wings, and he has bees around him, possibly representing the fact that Aphrodite can sting. She's beautiful, but she's not always easy. Here is Aphrodite with two other figures, Eros, whom we just saw, looks very much like the Eros we just saw with wings, small. And then she's also with the god Pan, who is the god of instinctive life, of kind of a wild dance of life, of being out in the wild, like a goat almost, but human, like a human goat. And the two of them understand each other and probably help each other. But even in this case, she's trying to cover herself up a little bit, and she's looking off to the side, and she's got, which is rather common for her, a smile on her face. This image is a painting, famous painting by Botticelli, and it's in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. It's called La Primavera, or Spring, and it's cut off a little bit, but if you look in the far right, we see that figure, the west wind blowing in spring, and the west wind, the winds blow in the new season of spring, and the first figure after the wind is Chloris, who makes everything green, and after her Flora, who brings flowers. We'll skip the middle figure for a moment, and then there are the three graces, traditionally understood in this case to be chastity, beauty, and pleasure, doing their dance. They do a dance of the unfolding of Aphrodite into the world, the grace of life, the graces of living, how graceful life can be. And chastity then looks over toward the last figure on the far left, who is Mercury, or Hermes. We know that because of the way he's dressed for traveling, and for his hat, and for the wand he has in his hand pointing to the clouds. Clouds themselves are related to Mercury or Hermes because they're always changing shape and suggesting all different kinds of designs and figures. So this is an interesting image. Presumably the middle figure is Aphrodite or Venus. That's how it's been mostly interpreted, not entirely, but for the most part, with Eros above her, which makes it even clearer that it would be Venus, because they are usually together. And then we see this rather typical, as we know now, way of dressing, where she is partly clothed in a thick garment and partly clothed in a transparent garment. That's her heavenly and earthly nature. And so this is clearly Aphrodite in her garden, blessing, her hand raised in blessing to spring and to the beauties of spring, and to the usual notions of sexuality in spring, all of that, the coupling of animals, the whole business of spring, and the apples. This is a painting by Botticelli also, called Venus and Mars. It's in the National Gallery in London. And this shows Venus and Mars together. They were lovers, and they were lovers in the Iliad. And so here they are, lovers, and they have apparently just made love. And Mars has been subdued by this lovemaking. And these imps, these little goat-like figures, these are like children, are playing with his weapons. They've turned them into toys, and they're in a way kind of mocking him, at least. And look at the imp with the Mars's helmet on. The whole thing is playful and taking away that aggression of Mars. I look at this painting, I look at the way of Venus is looking there, composed and looking knowingly at Mars. It seems to me this painting is about how Venus could help us deal with aggression. and I often say this painting is the solution to world peace, because, and I think it's through Aphrodite. Aphrodite is our way to bring soul to the world and to bring peace. This woodcut comes from the story in the Iliad where Aphrodite and Ares, or Mars and Venus, are making love, so it's similar to the previous painting. But in this story, in the Iliad, Aphrodite is married to Hephaestus, who is the one who makes metal tools and weapons for the gods. And you see him there in the far right in his forge, working, hammering out some new thing. But he has made this metal set of chains or wires to go over the lovers to trap them. He's got them trapped, and he called the gods to come to witness what had happened. He was very upset that his wife was caught with another man, Mars or Ares. In the middle, standing above them, with the M above his head, is Hermes or Mercury. We know him clearly by the wings on his hat, by the caduceus in his hand, and by the wand in his hand. This is Hermes, and in the story, Hermes says, I don't care if you put chains around me. Even with the chains, I still would like to be there in the bed with Aphrodite. Here's another gesture of Aphrodite. It was often used in dances that especially women would be involved in, where they would lift their skirts above their knees. And it's called anasirma. It's this idea, we see it in the statues, we see it that she is both covered and uncovered. She's at that place, that liminal place where she's revealing herself and yet not entirely. This is Marilyn Monroe taking this anasirma gesture. Obviously, she didn't think about it when she decided to do this or when the filmmakers decided to do it, but this is the image that came out. And of course, people don't think about it, but this is a classic image going back thousands of years that gives us a gesture showing the presence of this great goddess. And the last image I'm going to show you is very basic, I think very beautiful, of Aphrodite associated with the shell. And I think the main reason for this is that the shell, the scallop shell, especially when you open it up like that, would remind you again of the female genitals. And this is important to Aphrodite. This is what symbolizes her, of who she is, what she's about. And it gives, I think, a kind of holiness to our sexuality. Not in the way people often think of it, because Aphrodite is deep into affirming our sexuality and is strong, has a great deal of strength and force in showing how important our sexuality is, and to be brave and to accept it and to live out our sexual natures. So these are the gestures of Aphrodite, some of them. And you might call them mudras, and some of the objects related to her. But remember, as you look at these, if you want to go back and look at them again, that this goddess is a power in life. And the images we're looking at here tell us not about some obscure religious belief of the past, but about a power that is right there in our lives today, and these images might give us some insight into how that power works and how we might respond to it.